The accounting firm of Haynes, Eisenbarger, and Skiba presents the 28th College Football Hall of Fame season of Fighting Irish Preview. And now, your host, Phil Houck.
13-1 a year ago and ranked in the preseason top 10, back in August, Florida State had the look of a formidable team. But you have to play the games. And it's not been pretty. This week, the Seminoles come into Notre Dame Stadium at 1-8. It's been a long season in Tallahassee. But that's not the way things have always been. In fact, let me tell you a tale about the 1993 Game of the Century. In November of that year, Bobby Bowden's number 1 ranked Florida State, led by quarterback Charlie Ward, visited number 2 Notre Dame. Lou Holtz's ND team was a 7-point underdog, but had plenty of weapons, including a pulverizing ground game and a suffocating defense. NBC billed the matchup all week as the game of the century, and ESPN's College Game Day went on location for the first time ever. Notre Dame fans, smelling a national title, arrived early and were on their feet the entire game. The noise was deafening. Florida State took an early 7-0 lead, but the Irish ground game got rolling and Notre Dame led 24-7 midway through the third quarter. But then the Florida State offense came alive, and with 1 minute and 39 seconds remaining, Florida State had the ball and was within a score at 31-24. In 3 plays, they moved down the field, and with 3 seconds remaining, the Seminoles had driven to the ND 14-yard line. 1 play left for everything. Charlie Ward took the snap, rolled left, and fired the ball to the corner of the end zone. A receiver flashed open, and for a millisecond, I recall my heart skipping. But safety Sean Wooden darted across the goal line and batted the ball away. Notre Dame was number 1. The student section flooded the field, and the broadcast crew promptly started pushing for a New Year's Day Bowl rematch. All over South Bend, a raucous celebration carried on until late into the night. The dream unfortunately ended for the Fighting Irish the next week at the hands of Boston College. But for 1 week, Notre Dame, Florida State had the undivided attention of the football world in a game that indeed lived up to its billing as the game of the century. We now return you to 2024. Guadalupe's Mexican Grill, now with locations on Illinois, Leo, and DuPont Roads, in Georgetown Square, and in the Allen County Memorial Coliseum. Guadalupe's, food made fresh. Now, stay tuned for Fighting Irish Insight from America's foremost authority on Notre Dame football, Tim Priester, publisher of IrishIllustrated.com. Fighting Irish Preview is brought to you by the accounting firm of Haynes, Eisenbarger, and Skiba, Shear McCulloch Auctioneers, Notre Dame Federal Credit Union, where you bank does matter, and Flight by Yuengling. 2.6 grams of carbs and 95 calories. It's the next generation of light beer. This is Fighting Irish Preview.
The University of Notre Dame exemplifies dedication to hard work, integrity, and personal values, which result in success in the classroom and on the football field. The professionals at Haynes, Eisenbarger, and Skiba, like Notre Dame, know the same dedication, and their experience and expertise provide peace of mind for you and your business. Tax planning, tax compliance, auditing, business valuation, and estate planning, the full-service accounting firm of Haynes, Eisenbarger, and Skiba, like the Irish, has what it takes to help you achieve success. Located in Fort Wayne near Jefferson Point, Haynes, Eisenbarger, and Skiba proudly supports Notre Dame football and congratulates all those who are a part of the greatest tradition in all of sports. Go Irish!
Flight by Yuengling is the next generation of light beer. For those who don't follow trends, but craft them. Flight by Yuengling is 12 ounces of uncompromised refreshment from America's oldest brewery. With only 2.6 grams of carbs and 95 calories, this is premium refreshment 6 generations in the making. Don't just raise a glass, raise the bar. Flight by Yuengling. Available wherever beer is sold. DG Yuengling and Son Incorporated, Pottsville, Pennsylvania. Please enjoy responsibly.
Now back to Fighting Irish Preview with your host, Phil Houck.
Well, Tim Priester, back to football after another week off. And let's talk about that first CFP ranking that came out the other day. Notre Dame comes in at 10th. Was that about right? Is that what you expected?
Yeah, I think we talked on our Irish Illustrated Insider podcast 9 or 10. I would have probably placed them 9th, but I understand 10th. And a lot of times you encounter Notre Dame fans and they're upset about where they're ranked. And look, if you want to be higher than 10th, don't lose to Northern Illinois at home. It's really as simple as that. You kind of give up all rights to complain when you do that. But they're positioned well. By losing to Northern Illinois, they're probably not going to get a 5 or 6 seed at any point in the process. But they're still in line if you win all your games to get a 7 or 8 seed, and so you have a chance to host. If and when that happens, and I'm not one to make huge complaints about the CFP because I know that it's an impossible job to please everybody, and everybody's going to have a different slant depending upon what team that you follow. The only two that I would really complain about, I don't think Penn State should be 6th ahead of Tennessee, and I really don't think the SMU should be 13th. I think they should be ahead of Boise State. But we're talking about a couple spots, and this is not the end game. It's just the start. And so 10th for Notre Dame. And a couple of the other ones, I think it's fine for first ballot.
Yeah, they're positioned. Notre Dame is positioned well, starting at 10th, so long as they win out, and getting that home game in the first round is ultra important. And surprises in the top 12. You mentioned Penn State. I agree with that one. I thought they were 1 or 2 or 3 places too high.
Yeah, SMU should. SMU, they lost a really great low-scoring game to BYU, but they won at Louisville. They won at Duke. Duke 6-2 or 6-3, and they destroyed Pittsburgh that was undefeated. How is that not better than
I don't know.
Boise State in the Mountain West beating Washington State and UNLV?
And so did I not see then, speaking of SMU, that Notre Dame has now added SMU to their schedule for 2026?
Yeah, if you would have said this a couple of years ago, you wouldn't have thought much of it. But now they're in the ACC, and we know they're based in Dallas, and they're going to be able to recruit. They're going to spend a lot of NIL money. They spent a lot of money when it wasn't legal to do it. So they will definitely spend a lot of money when it is legal. And when you're based in Dallas, you're going to have access to a lot of great players.
Yeah, indeed. And SMU, they're the original team that's had the death penalty, I think, attributed to their program for recruiting violations back in the day. Anyway, so back to the CFP, though. So based upon this, at this point of the season, Tim, who do you think is the best team in college football? And can Notre Dame play with them?
Well, I think right now it's Oregon. I think clearly they're the number one team. That would be a heck of a matchup, wouldn't it? Oregon's offense against Notre Dame's defense. Georgia is the one that concerns me the most just because of the physicality of their defensive front against Notre Dame's offensive line. I know Ohio State has a boatload of talent that they've paid for, but they haven't played up to the highest level. I think those are the main three. Miami's great offensively, but they're suspect defensively, and Notre Dame's defense against their offense would be a good matchup. Texas is probably up there with that Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia group. But I think right now Oregon deserves to be the number one team. They've proven themselves.
Well, I think the difference from years past is that there's really nobody above Notre Dame at this point that scares me. I think Notre Dame can play with these teams. Whether they beat them, that's obviously a totally different thing. So, just keep winning and things will take care of themselves. Tim, Marcus Freeman's weekly press conference this week. Some news came out of that on Monday that I thought was welcome news. A player who suffered a season-ending injury earlier this season is going to be back for 2026. We thought he might have headed for the NFL. Who's coming back?
Well, it's Jordan Botelho, who was in the midst of or had just started a really, really great fifth-year season before he tore it. It actually, not sure, it's not ACL, it's patella, and which might be a little bit more difficult to recover from. So that's kind of the good news is a little bit tainted because apparently his recovery is off to a slow start and he has a long way to go. But yes, absolutely. Jordan Botelho asked Marcus Freeman if he had spoken with him during the bye week, and he said yes, and he will be back for a six year. But he has quite a bit of progress to make up health-wise.
Okay, well, that still nonetheless is good news, and we wish him well in his recovery, of course. And we go into the current injuries in the second segment, of course, but I want to take kind of a more broader view of the injuries. And I heard you guys talk about this on your Irish Insider podcast this week. ND has had 5 season-ending injuries: Botelho, Traore, Ben Morrison, Charles Jagasaw, and Ashton Craig. If you could have any one of them back for a playoff run, who would it be?
You know, I could make an argument for most of those guys, but it would be Traore because that's just a pure pass rusher. You know, I mean, that's so valuable. Look, Benjamin Morrison is a great football player, but it looks like Leonard Moore is a great football player too. So you have somebody to place there. Of course, you lose the depth at the cornerback position, but I'd say Traore just because of the pure pass rush ability. You know, Pat Coogan is not Ashton Craig, but I think he's done a really, really nice job. If I had to pick, it would be Traore just because of that flash off the edge.
100% I'd go with that. I think he was on the verge of stardom when he went down, and I think he is still going to be a star. And a pass rusher like that can, you know, that's a difference maker in a big game, and that's what the Irish are gunning for right now. Marcus Freeman also had high praise Monday, Tim, for one of Notre Dame's linebackers, Jalen Sneed, the defensive player of the game for Navy. You know, a few weeks ago, this former 5-star recruit who had super high expectations had the looks of being on the outs. Only played 12 snaps against Louisville. Didn't appear to be very happy about that fact. How has Jalen Sneed managed to redeem himself?
Well, I made sure that we pointed him out the other day in one of our instant analysis segments following Marcus Freeman's press conference on Monday. Jalen Sneed played great against Navy, and you know I always say that you can, when adversity hits, you got a couple different responses, and you can go in the tank. You can have one foot out the door, or you can be a team player and keep working hard at practice and put yourself in a position to have success and to help people around you be better. And I thought that that's what Jalen Sneed has done. Now, by the end of the season, when it comes to decide, you know, comes time to decide what he wants to do, he is the 5th linebacker out of 5. Jack Kaiser will be leaving, so 3 of the 5, 3 of the other 4 will be coming back, and he may choose to go somewhere where he can play more. But I give him a lot of credit. He was impactful, and I think he has a real good chance to be impactful this weekend as well.
Yeah, credit to that young man for getting it together and seeing the big picture a little bit better, because he did play really well. And, you know, with a talented guy, if he gets right, he can also be one of those difference makers. Tim, last summer, and now we're going to start talking about the task at hand. Last summer, you know, we thought this team was going to be really good. So, Tim, what happened to Florida State?
Man, it's complex. I don't know.
It's bad.
I can say it was this. I mean, clearly, you didn't get the right mix of transfers. They brought in 17. They brought talent in. There's no doubt about that. They brought offensive linemen in from Auburn, Florida, and Alabama. None of those guys are playing. There may be injuries involved there, but it's not a struggling offensive line. It is an outright bad offensive line, and because of that, you know, and the quarterback play is equally bad. And DJ Uiagalelei is hurt, but he wasn't playing well. Now you have 2 young guys behind him that are combining for like 42% completion percentage. So offensive line, bad quarterback play. That's where it really starts. Because I do think, you know, I think they've got some skill position athletes on offense, but if you don't have an O-line or a quarterback to deliver the football, you're not going to be able to take advantage of that skilled athleticism. Defense, I think they've got good players on the defensive line. I know they have good cornerbacks, but I really think the defense has reached a point where they know this offense is not going to be able to score enough for them to win. They scored 21 points in their first game at Georgia Tech or against Georgia Tech in Dublin and lost. They have not reached 21 points in the last 8 games. So it starts on the offensive line and quarterback. And it's up to the coaching staff to create chemistry when you bring in 17 transfers. They've been unable to do it. So I don't think it's one thing. I think it's multiple things, Phil.
Well, you live by the transfer portal and you can die by the transfer portal. And I want to talk a little bit more about that transfer portal strategy, so to speak. And that, as I said, that has seemingly failed at Florida State this year. And then there's the extremes right now out in college football. Dabo Swinney at Clemson. Last year, 12 of his players transferred out, but none in, and that's a Dabo Swinney habit. He doesn't bring in transfers. On the other extreme, then there are even more extreme examples, but Louisville's Jeff Brom, 32 in. He did something similar in his first season, and he's winning. He's figured out how to build that really quickly. You wrote about this issue this week. Where does Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame stand in this transfer portal game? I'm assuming it's somewhere in between those two extremes.
Yeah, I think he's done a nice job of finding the happy medium, that's what Dabo Swinney needs to do. I mean, you can't be hard-headed about it. You need to patch some holes in your lineup, and he hasn't been able to do that. But I think Marcus Freeman has taken the right approach. He stated to us when we had a big gathering with the media at the end of May that that Notre Dame is going to rely most heavily on high school recruiting. I think that's the right way to go because you need to build a culture, and Notre Dame is so culture heavy or so culture unique. You need to be able to do that. So the players that he brings in, 8 or 9, I think he may have to expand that a little bit this year to 10, 11, 12. But he talks about, and he talked about with us in May and the other day when I asked him about it, the need for players to love Notre Dame. You have to embrace Notre Dame when you come in. So they're really careful about who they bring in. But for the most part, it's been very good. A guy like R.J. Oben hasn't produced. There's been a couple others along the way, but by and large, they've gotten productivity out of Riley Leonard and Bo Collins. Chris Mitchell has picked up the pace a little bit for them. Well, Javonte Jean-Baptiste last year was a tremendous addition with the pass rush. So there's a balance, I think, going into next year. The main area, Notre Dame won't be pursuing a quarterback again. They're going to stick with their roster upon the end of Riley Leonard's 1 year at Notre Dame. The main focus is defensive tackle. You're losing Cross and Mills. They're going to have to hit it hard right there. And that's why I say 10, 11, 12, you might need to expand it by a couple this coming year.
Yeah, you can expand that a little bit, but overall, Notre Dame is still going to focus on prep recruiting. I'm convinced of that. And it makes sense to develop them into that culture, and that'll make them 3 or 4 year players, which is ultra important, and just plugging holes with a few transfers. Tim, we don't usually get a chance to do this on the show, but since we've had a bye week, let's talk a little bit about basketball, Notre Dame basketball. Micah Shrewsbury has now opened up his second season at Notre Dame. He was with a win this week against Stonehill. 7-13 a year ago. So what are your expectations for year 2?
I'd set the bar at 10-10, and I think that's realistic. I mean, I got to be completely honest. I don't have a really good feel for the expanded ACC men's basketball conference. I'm a little too deep into Notre Dame football right now, but that's going to add a different dynamic to it, no doubt. But I would say 10-10 would be the bar, and I think they're capable of maybe 11-9 if things really break their way, 10-8. But I don't want to get ahead of myself here because that would be a pretty significant improvement. But better depth, better post play at center where Kebajai looks a little bit more athletic. Nikita Konstantinovsky is an import from Ukraine, so I think the post play will be better. They'll just be able to go a little bit deeper. I love the way that Braden Shrewsbury has changed his body, prolific shooter. We know about Marcus Burton. I think Tay Davis is going to be one of the better players in the conference. So it's going to be a lot more fun. I guarantee they're going to be able to score the basketball a lot better than they did last year.
Yeah, and of course we're talking about their record in the ACC, and 10-10 can get you into the tournament. in the conference. That could happen. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but this is team. Yeah, it's a team that stock is definitely going up.
Yeah, it's been tougher and tougher for the 10 and 10s and the 11 and 9s and even the 12 and 8s in the ACC to make the NCAA tournament here recently. So we'll see. The ACC needs to bring the profile of the men's basketball conference back up to what it was because it slipped in recent years.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, well, that's your basketball preview. And let's move on to our last question of the segment, the Tim Priester Fun Question of the Week. And people are just raving about these questions, Tim. They love
I bet they are.
Now, here's the question. Tim Priester, if you could interview any one person from Notre Dame football history, past or present, who would it be? And if you want to, drop a few names of greats that you have interviewed. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I've been doing this long enough that I've covered most of them. Look, of course, it would be absolutely fascinating to see what it would be like to sit down with Knute Rockne. There's no doubt. But I mean, Moose Krause. I sat down with Moose Krause, Eric Parsegian. I think Eric Parsegian would be someone that I would like to re-interview, I guess I would say, because I think he's just I'd like to talk to Parsegian when he was in his prime because he was such a fiery, motivating individual. I never had that opportunity. It came a little bit later in life. But those are, when I look at that I've covered like 80% of the bowl games that they played. I've interviewed a lot of these people. But Rockne would be fascinating. There's no doubt about it. Phil, I think you have somebody that from the Rockne era that would be fascinating to interview that you'd like to spend a little time with.
Yeah, I sure do. But first of all, the one interview that I have been able to do, which I still look most fondly on, is that I interviewed Joe Theismann once in a broom closet. Because that was the only place we could find to get away from all the noise. We were at a grand opening of a restaurant in Pittsburgh. Anyway, at Theismann, I was nervous as a cat because Theismann was my all-time favorite player as a kid.
I think the most nervous I ever was interviewing Tom Clements for the first time, and I've interviewed him many times since then, and there's absolutely nothing to fear because he's as dignified and mild-mannered as he could be. But I know the feeling. Tom Clements shook me up a little bit interviewing him the first time.
It can happen. But the guy that I would, of course, want to interview would be George Gipp. I think one of in not just Notre Dame football, but one of history's most fascinating characters. And those who are familiar with Fighting Irish Preview know that I did a 3-part series on Gipp a couple of years ago, and I've since discovered even more material on him. He was fascinating and a great athlete. Gosh, I would love to talk to George Gipp. Anyway, here we go. Thanks, Tim. Coming up, it's the all-time Irish hero, key to an Irish victory, injury report, and the world-famous Irish Illustrated prediction. And during the break, it's the Fighting Irish Fact of the Week, brought to you by Ron Wise and the Wise Insurance Agency. This is the 406th edition of Fighting Irish Preview.
This is Art Salzberg. I don't speak for a lot of companies, but Shearer McCulloch is a firm that provides a great and much-needed service. As Sharon and I get older, we've been thinking of moving, but frankly, the thought is somewhat overwhelming. That's where Shearer McCulloch comes in with a full-service plan that takes the pressure off. Listen to this. Shearer McCulloch will sell your house, auction the items you don't want to take, then pack everything else and move you. In sports terms, that's a blowout win. Shearer McCulloch uses an international auction platform to make sure your possessions are seen by the right buyers. They'll get top dollar for your special treasures. Shearer McCulloch is highly recommended by leading retirement communities and law firms, plus they're AAA with the Better Business Bureau. Call them at 441-8636. That's 441-8636. They'll make your moving experience easy and profitable. Shearer McCulloch.
The Fighting Irish Fact of the Week is brought to you by our friends at the Wise Insurance Agency. With 10 such wins, no other active FBS coach has earned more ranked victories in his first 3 seasons than Marcus Freeman. Call Ron Wise at the Wise Insurance Agency or go to thewiseinsuranceagency.com and get an auto or home quote in less than 5 minutes.
Over the last 190 years, a lot has changed.
But at Yuengling, America's oldest brewery, we're still focused on one thing: brewing darn good beer.
Yuengling, the oldest brewery in America.
Now back to Fighting Irish Preview with your host, Phil Houck.
This is Fighting Irish Preview. The 10th-ranked Irish are at home against Florida State this week. TV coverage on NBC starts at 7:30 p.m. South Bend time. And it's now time for the all-time Irish hero, brought to you by the Marina at Lake Gage. Chris Craft, Mastercraft, Vanderbilt, and Premier Pontoons. New and previously owned, we share your boating passion. And today we continue our series on the Notre Dame National Award winners. So far, we've covered Ross Browner, Tony Rice, Rocket Ismail, Brady Quinn, Tyler Eifert, and this week's winner is the winner of the 2009 Biletnikoff Award as the nation's most outstanding receiver, Golden Tate. Golden Tate was born in Tennessee, and in high school, he did it all on the football field, offense and defense. Star center fielder on the baseball team, and a state champion sprinter. Tate was good enough on the diamond that he was drafted out of high school in 2007 by the Arizona Diamondbacks. But he chose to go to Notre Dame with plans to play both baseball and football. As a freshman, he made a splash at Notre Dame as a kick returner and a part-time wide receiver. He also played baseball well, and by his sophomore season was a starter and a .329 hitter. But his football career had really blossomed after a huge sophomore season on the field for the Irish, and he made the decision to concentrate on football. With Jimmy Clausen as his quarterback and Charlie Weiss dialing up a pass-happy offense, he emerged his sophomore year to post 1,080 yards receiving and 10 touchdown catches. In Notre Dame's Hawaii Bowl victory that season, he put on one of the great performances in Notre Dame history with a 6-catch, 177-yard performance and 3 touchdowns. In his junior year, he got even better. He set school records with 93 catches, 1,496 yards, and 15 touchdowns. He posted some monster performances, including a 244-yard day against Washington and a 201-yard day against Stanford. After all that, Tate was made a unanimous All-American and the Biletnikoff Award winner, and he headed to the NFL. Tim, Golden Tate was not a big receiver at only 5'11", but he had strong hands and seemed to win practically every jump ball that came his way.
I can remember being in San Antonio and Notre Dame was playing Washington State. It was before halftime. He had a jump ball with 3 defenders, maybe 4 Washington State defenders. He came up with it for the touchdown. His single season, 2009, Phil, you said it, 93 catches, 1,496 yards, 15 touchdowns, the greatest single season performance ever. Now, a couple of years later, Michael Floyd had 100 catches, but he was 350 yards shy of what Golden Tate did in Notre Dame. Spectacular athlete. One of those guys, I think of Kyron Williams when I think of him because Golden Tate thought he was going to make every catch, and Kyron Williams thought he was going to make every run.
Golden Tate, I remember that play too. Just an exciting player to watch. The Seattle Seahawks drafted him in the second round. He went on to a productive 11-season NFL career, amassing 46 touchdown catches and 8,278 yards receiving. Golden Tate, another Marina at Lake Gage, all-time Irish hero, the Marina at Lake Gage. We love boats. And it's now time for the Notre Dame Federal Credit Union key to an Irish victory. Picked as a preseason top 10 team by many after winning the ACC and going 13-1 a year ago, it's been a dreadful season in Tallahassee. Mike Norville's Seminoles are on a 5-game losing streak and stand at 1-8 after losing a home game last week to North Carolina, 36-14. Their only win of the season was back in week 4 at Cal, 14-9. Injuries and poor play at quarterback have plagued Florida State. FSU started the season with old Notre Dame nemesis DJ Uiagalelei at quarterback. He played poorly, and he's injured now. Now, backup freshman quarterback Brock Glenn has also struggled after getting a few starts. And also freshman Luke Kromenhoek He started a couple weeks ago. Nothing's working. Out of 133 FBS programs, FSU ranks 132nd in rushing, 131st in passing efficiency, 132nd on third down, 130th in turnovers, 132nd in scoring, and 129th at giving up sacks. The best that can be said about Florida State's offense is that statistically, well, they do have a good kicker, field goal kicker, but they also have one of the top punters in the nation, and he should be good. He's had a lot of practice. Defensively, the Seminoles have rated only a little bit better than their offense, 96th in total defense, 114th in rushing defense, 92nd in passing defense. They give up 27.3 points a game. That is 86 nationally. The Seminoles have shown the ability to rush the passer on the season. They have notched 22 sacks, and that is the 33rd best mark in the country. Marcus Freeman weighed in at his weekly press conference this week and stated the following: "It's a very talented football team. The record doesn't reflect their talent." And I think that's a fair statement, Tim, because this team is loaded with talent. But ever since they were denied that berth last year in the college football playoff last season, culturally, the program just seems to have been in a rapid downward spiral. Tim Priester, what is the Notre Dame Federal Credit Union key to an Irish victory?
It is a very talented roster, but without cohesion and chemistry, this is what you get. Look, I can't believe I'm saying this. I don't think Notre Dame can lose this game. One caveat I would put on it: you got to win the turnover battle, or it has to be even. If you lose the turnover battle by 4 or 5 or 6, like Navy did against Notre Dame a couple weeks ago, well, then you could lose. But other than that, Notre Dame's going to win this game as long as they protect the football and play it even or within one of breaking even in the turnover department.
Okay, don't turn over the ball a bunch. That's always a good thing to not do if you want to win. But in this game, it's really important. That is Tim Priester's Notre Dame Federal Credit Union key to an Irish victory. And Tim Priester, who is this week's Notre Dame Federal Credit Union key player for the Irish?
I've talked about how poor the play at quarterback has been and equally poor along the offensive line. I'm looking at somebody going against the left tackle for Florida State, Darius Washington. I believe he's still in the lineup, number 76. So I'm looking at Notre Dame Vipers. I think Josh Burnham and Junior Tui Alamaka are prime candidates to be the stars in this game.
All right, those Vipers, Burnham and Tui Alamaka, those are your Notre Dame Federal Credit Union key Irish players this week. Look for them to hopefully get some sacks. Notre Dame Federal Credit Union, where you bank, does matter. And it's now time for the Injury Report, brought to you by Indiana Physical Therapy. Your choice for physical therapy now with 21 Indiana locations. Tim, how are the Irish health-wise going into this ballgame?
As can be expected coming off of a bye week, it's a good report. A little disappointing that Mitch Jeter was still listed as questionable by Marcus Freeman on Monday. Now, if you go to Notre Dame's website, he's listed as the starter, which hasn't been the case the last couple weeks, so that's promising, but he's still listed as questionable. Logan Thomas, who is a Viper who's played a little bit on defensive end, but mainly on special teams, really good special teams player. He has a hamstring issue and is unlikely to play against Florida State.
And there's some news on C.J. Carr, who is battling with some elbow or shoulder soreness.
It's elbow. He took a hit that a guy of C.J. Carr's magnitude probably shouldn't take in practice. It was a few weeks ago. Marcus Freeman was asked point blank, will he need surgery? He said no. They're just being really cautious with him. He hasn't thrown yet, but they anticipate him throwing very, very soon.
All right, get him healthy. He is the future. Thanks, Tim. And that is the Indiana Physical Therapy Injury Report. And it's now time for the world-famous IrishIllustrated.com prediction, brought to you by SES Environmental. Need help navigating environmental risk and with regulatory compliance? You need SES. Look them up at sesadvantage.com. Tim Priester, Vegas says the Irish by 26. So what does America's foremost authority say?
Just going to read you a few facts here, Phil. Florida State has yet to gain 300 yards total offense in a single game. Brock Glenn and Luke Kromenhoek are completing 42% of their passes. As a team, they've scored 14 touchdowns in 9 games. Riley Leonard has 11 himself. Jeremiah Love has 10. Florida State's led for 81 out of 540 minutes. That's just 15%. They've had 5 games where they didn't have a lead at all. They've scored 130 points in 9 games, and Notre Dame has 293. They have no chance of beating Notre Dame unless Notre Dame throws interceptions and fumbles that the Florida State defense returns for touchdowns. I have Notre Dame 37, Florida State 6.
37-6 in favor of the Irish. That is Tim Priester's world-famous IrishIllustrated.com prediction. Yeah, and there are just a boatload of statistics, Tim, as we know, that just show how futile and just dreadful the season has been for Florida State. But I agree with Marcus Freeman. It's a talented team, so you have to always know that that's a risk. And they could rally. It could be like a wounded animal. I don't know. I'm coming from the Lou Holtz school. Everybody scares me to death. But it's probably not going to happen on the road and probably not at night at Notre Dame Stadium. The Irish are a team coming off a bye. They just have too many weapons on offense and too much defense to falter in this one. I'll take the Irish, ND 35, Florida State 10. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Phil.
Go Irish. And thanks for listening to Fighting Irish Preview. Special thanks to Jim Shovelin, Brett Rump, Art Salzberg, and studio producer Adam Schenkel. Fighting Irish Preview is the copyrighted property of Judge Phil Productions. For more Fighting Irish Preview, look us up at fightingirishpreview.com.
Podcasts by Federated Media.